Well, thank you very much for coming. This is part of my Patriot Tour. We're trying to get people all across America and all across the political spectrum to come together to take back America. My old friends in the leftist peace movement, I don't think can do it by themselves. And my supporters in the Libertarian Party and the Constitution Party and the militias can't do it themselves. It's going to take the left and right coming together to take back America. Now, we have been artificially divided for far too long. We've been divided by the wealthy elite, the global robber barons who own both major political parties and run most of the world, truth be known. And they have divided us left and right in order to have us fighting each other instead of coming together to resist them. Now, in order to give us the illusion that we actually have a choice in this country, they've taken their two major political parties and they said, well, you guys be for abortion and you be for against it, you be for school prayer, you be against it, gay rights, gun control. They take all the hot button issues and divide them up. Makes it look like the two political parties are very different. The thing that all those hot button issues have in common is that the wealthy elites could care less how it turns out. Those issues do not affect their bottom line, and they just don't care. But when it comes to the issues that matter, going to war to secure an oil pipeline or signing an international trade agreement to drive down wages and drive up profits, they expect both major political parties to come together and do what they're told. And for the most part, they do. For example, we know that nobody can hold a candle to George W. Bush when it comes to wars of aggression. But Bill Clinton had his as well. He completed the rape of Yugoslavia, started by George I, and gave us 70 days of bombing Kosovo in violation of the War Powers Act and the U.S. Constitution. When it comes to international trade, George W. Bush gave us CAFTA and is attempting to give us the North American Union, which would complete the job of taking away our sovereignty and making us a third world nation. Now, we're not going to let him get away with that one. His only hope was to do it without the American people becoming aware of what was going on. He hasn't even submitted it to Congress. He's not asking anybody. He's just trying to do it all on his own. He's not going to get away with it. And we'll have more to say about that later. But Bill Clinton gave us NAFTA and the World Trade Organization. And this really got globalization off and running in the wrong direction. And it was Al Gore, who is so marvelous on global warming, who was the hatchet man for the Clinton administration to cram NAFTA down the throats of a reluctant Congress. So both parties have been guilty. They do what they're told when it comes to the big money issues. And that's what we have to stop, because it's costing us, the American people. It's costing us dearly. Now, I had hoped to be able to address you tonight as Congressman Bob Bowman. That didn't happen. I did win my Democratic primary in Florida, beating a middle-of-the-road, mainstream Democrat named John Kennedy. But I lost the general election to a 7-term incumbent Republican and his Diebold touchscreen voting machines. That 7-term incumbent, by the way, originally ran on term limits. Now, since I can't address you as Congressman Bob Bowman, I've decided to address you as President Bob Bowman. I'm going to ask you to pretend that I'm addressing you as President of the United States and giving my State of the Union address shortly after my inauguration. Your role is to play members of Congress, the Supreme Court, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Cabinet, various visiting dignitaries. Accordingly, as is always the case, your task is to clap and cheer like crazy when you hear something you like, and sit on your hands when you don't. And the purpose of this, as always, is to let the American people watching on television know what they're supposed to believe. Now, seated behind me are the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate, who is also the Vice President of the United States. Madam Speaker, Madam President, distinguished members of Congress, honored guests, and my fellow Americans. The United States is unquestionably number one in the industrialized world. Number one in our use of the world's resources. Number one in the production of pollution. Number one in the gap between the rich and the poor. Number one in deaths by gunfire. Number one in teen pregnancy. Number one in poverty among the elderly. Number one in citizens without health coverage. Number one in child poverty. Number one in homeless veterans. And number one in citizens behind bars. We are the world's number one debtor nation. Number one in the creation of new billionaires. Number one in school dropouts. Number one in poverty, homelessness, hunger, divorce, suicide, and, oh yes, number one in military force, nuclear weapons, and military spending, as much as all the other nations in the world combined. We also lead the world in the number of hours worked per family, since it now takes 2 wage earners and 3 jobs to bring in the same income you could get with 1 job working 40 hours a week in the 1950s. In spite of soaring productivity, real wages in this country are now 1/3 of what they were in the 1950s. If it wasn't for corporate control of our government,